Good morning, everybody. We're just going to let everybody roll in as the Zoom session has now commenced. It's Steve Benmor speaking, and I am pleased to be here with my colleague and fellow director of the Board of Directors, Batsheva of the Divorce Coaching Association of Ontario. And this is the webinar that we are hosting. It's actually our first webinar on behalf of this brand new association made up of some really amazing divorce professionals, many of whom are practicing divorce coaches, including Batsheva. And today we will be discussing the role of divorce coaching throughout the journey from the early stages, pre-separation and pre-divorce, through to the early stages of making the decision to split up, and also to throughout the entire navigation from beginning to end. And we've even had many stories of the spouses who have gone through separation and divorce with a divorce coach, continuing that relationship in in the period following their separation and divorce. In fact, way past the end of their divorce settlement. So, with that said, I wanted to kick off by letting you all know that we have a very great crowd of people, some of whom are divorce coaches, some of whom are aspiring divorce coaches, and some of whom have no interest whatsoever in being a divorce coach, but occupy the same professional space as divorce coaches and want to be part of our amazing community. I will now be inviting Batsheva to share with us her experience and her role in the lives of people going through separation and divorce by way of an introduction. Batsheva, why don't you share with us what is a typical day in the life of a divorce coach like you?
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you everyone for joining. Um, like Steve mentioned, I'm a divorce coach. I've been doing this for about 6 years now, and my days are full of supporting clients at different stages. I check in with clients, I help prepare them for big conversations and big decisions. I also work within my community in the Jewish community with Orthodox Jewish women, helping them navigate divorce. It's a very specific sector of women that I work with, men as well, that I work with now. I also work with international clients. I work with clients in the States as well as in other countries throughout the world. And it's really a universal language that we speak with what we're going through. So my days are quite exciting and quite full.
Well, why don't you take me to, for example, I don't know, yesterday? What did yesterday look like for Batsheva Sack, who is one of the leading divorce coaches in Ontario?
So I was actually, we discussed a little bit earlier, I was in court in Israel. I had a Canadian client who had a matter that was in the Israeli courts. So we were in court navigating that at about 3 a.m. It was really exciting and we had a great outcome. As well, I'm also paralegal, so I have some other things going on. Legal things that don't cross over into divorce coaching, but I do litigation. So I was doing a little bit of that yesterday, as well as, of course, we had a board meeting last night. So, working on developing the organization and creating a better working environment for all divorce coaches in Ontario.
And just to bring in the group, I would like the group to know that as much as Batsheva and I are speaking, you're part of this conversation as well, and we have a chat room. You are welcome to put your questions into the chat box, and we have our co-chair of our marketing committee, Taya Moreau, who is managing the chat box, and she will let us know as we have questions coming in. So feel free. But for those of you that have just heard Batsheva talk about how she was sitting in Thornhill, Canada, but attending a divorce court hearing in Israel via Zoom with a client who is also in Canada, attending a court hearing in Israel, and Batsheva was involved as a divorce coach. I just want to share with you, a couple of years ago, I myself was supporting a person attending the Jewish Rabbinical Court in Toronto, which is in the Bathurst and Finch area, and they were there to obtain their religious divorce. And I remember waiting outside for our turn, and the woman that was before us, who had attended in order to get her divorce, she stormed out of the room crying hysterically, screaming and yelling. And it was all a blizzard. And then they said, next. And then I went in with my client. And I remember thinking at that moment, poor woman, she didn't have anybody there to support her. And I don't know what her story was. I don't know if the husband refused the get. I don't know if she was granted the get. I don't know what the three rabbi panel said to her. But it was one of those moments when I sat there as a lawyer and I thought, wow, that woman could have benefited from somebody to be there beside her and support her. And so, Batsheva, what was your role with this woman that you supported yesterday who was via Zoom in Israel getting her religious divorce?
Yeah. So that is exactly what I do. I've been in that baked in that you speak about many times. And I actually trained together with some rabbis in Toronto about what the process is and what the woman should expect at each step. So she's not, surprised and caught off guard and ends up storming out in tears. But that is exactly what we did. We prepare and we know what's coming next. We consult with the legal professionals in Israel and in Toronto, the rabbis in Israel, the rabbis in Toronto. We, create expectations. I can manage the client's expectations so she knows what's coming next. You're not stepping into unknown territory alone. I've literally, from lived experience as well. Unfortunately, I've been through it. I navigated it, and I'm the person that I wish I had through it. And that I think is the most important thing. I'm not a friend who's going to tell you negative things about your ex-spouse or, have a biased outlook on your life. I'm really unbiased and I want the best for you. And I want to be able to help you through it because there's light on the other side. And my organization is actually called Tikva, which means hope. And that's what this is all about, the hope for a better life, the hope, that we can create something for ourselves that's better than what we were in that wasn't working, obviously, for ourselves, for our children. But I want to ask you something also, if I can.
Sure.
As a lawyer, because you just said something very interesting that, you saw something that you weren't equipped to handle as a lawyer. What do you think the first call is when somebody decides that they're going to separate, go to divorce? The first thing they say is, who's the best divorce lawyer? They're always looking for a divorce lawyer. What do you think about that?
Well, I think sadly society has very much been influenced by the media and these days by social media. And going back in time from the very beginning, when people think of separation and divorce, they think that it's a legal process. As a result of them thinking that it's a legal process, they immediately think that the first call should be to a lawyer. They could not be more wrong because the number of times I receive calls in a week for people that are contemplating divorce and they come to me and they expect me to assist them in this mental or psychological journey to go from thinking about divorce to actually engaging in the process is not a legal process. Lawyers are not trained or educated in that, and coaches are. In fact, many of the coaches that I have referred my clients to over the last few years were the ones that assisted them in, first of all, identifying whether the solution to their problem was even divorce. And if indeed it was the solution to divorce, when was the right time to commence divorce? And for some women, particularly women who are currently living in abusive relationships, the planning of the announcement of the divorce and the planning of housing and the planning of safety and the planning of the children, these are not matters that lawyers are trained, licensed, and insured to handle. These are matters that are in the hands of divorce coaches. And sadly, too many people have been influenced by TV shows like Suits or Law and Order. And when they think it's a legal affair, I have to hire a lawyer. And lawyers, first of all, are much more expensive than coaches. And secondly, they are not as accessible and as knowledgeable as the process involved. And so, we will see a turning point where in the future, the first call will not be to a lawyer. The first call will be to a divorce coach, which is why myself and others have banded together to create the DCAO, the Divorce Coaches Association of Ontario, in order to bring light to the value of the merit and the accessibility of high quality accredited divorce coaches.
So that's the first thing that I do is my first step with the client is to steady them. That's what number one is, to create a steadiness. And that's what you're talking about when they come to you and they're very unsteady. They don't know where they're going, what they're doing, should they do it, should they not do it. And it's usually, it can take up to 6 months, really, especially for a woman who needs housing, money, a job, like she can't just walk out penniless and homeless from a life that's probably the exact opposite of that, but unfortunately does entail a lot of abuse and unpleasant situations. So steadiness is my first step with clients.
But Sheva, we have a question from Heather Tannenbaum, and
Sure.
I'm going to use her question, which I'm going to read out loud in a moment, as a springboard. Heather writes, but Sheva, when you're in court, what is your role versus that of the lawyer? And what is the client's experience in court with you? But before you answer that question, Batsheva, I just want you to know that in my line of work, when I have a client that's about to go to court for a motion, a conference, or a trial, I know how stressful the idea is that on day such and such, they're going to have to wake up early, get the kids bathed, brushed, fed, off to school. Then they're going to have to come home and get ready. And then they're going to have to get either in an Uber, a subway, or a car and drive to court. And then they're going to walk to the front door through the metal detectors, wondering if their lawyer is there, where their lawyer is, whether they're going to bump into their ex, whether they're going to bump into their ex's lawyer, and then somehow meander through the hallways of the court, if that's by live and otherwise by Zoom, and then eventually sit there 10 to 15 feet away from their ex-spouse in a warlike zone. And so when I think about that woman that barged out of the Beit Din a couple years ago and was crying hysterically, I wondered what would have happened if somebody like you was in her life and then went with her to the Beit Din 1 week beforehand and walked the hall and showed her the door and told her where you and her were going to sit together while waiting for the three rabbis to let them in. And then you said to her, and when the door opens, you're sitting at this chair and I'm sitting at that chair. And at any moment in time when you need support, just put your hand out and I'll hold it. Or you'll tell the rabbis, I need a break. And then I, Batsheva, will walk with you to the bathroom. I will wipe your tears. I will give you a bottle of water. I will be there for you. So to Heather Tannenbaum's question, Batsheva, when you're in court, what's your role?
So you pretty much said it all. When I'm in court, my role is to prepare, obviously, the client. I'm a paralegal, but I'm not giving any legal advice as a divorce coach. So we're helping the client making decisions and giving them information leading up to the court date. And also, what's important, like you said, is the client should be leaning on their lawyer for emotional support. So I'm the emotional support. The coach is the emotional support through the process. I also help them prepare for the day of. Like I remember myself having four little kids and having to get to court for 9:30 in the morning. So helping prepare that morning, what it's going to be, preparing the children, also helping the parent prepare the children for the morning, and also it's the end of the day also you need to prepare for. It's not only the morning, what time are we finishing, how late are we staying, what's traffic going to be like, how are the kids getting home from school, but during the process We're really there as, a comfort, a bubble almost around the client to protect them from all the elements, the X, maybe a judgment that they don't want to hear, maybe the lawyer telling them something they don't want to hear, and also to manage the expectations of the day in a way that's, you know, going to be logical. Like you're not going to walk out with 100% of everything you want every time. Let's manage our expectations. Your lawyer said this, but you're not happy with this. Well, this is why, we need to create a scenario where we can be happy with this, or how can we make this work? So,
I'm going to move us along the journey and the actual step-by-step process. Let's talk about the client has now made the decision and they would like to move forward with their separation. Once that decision has been made and they've communicated that at least to you and to me, the first few weeks can be very emotional, to the point where the client's feet are not on the ground. They're not their best self. They are probably not a good sister or daughter or mother or father or friend. What is your role in this journey at that point?
so at that point, we're usually deciding on a lawyer, helping my client to interview different lawyers. Also, there might be different things like financial things to get in order, finding the right accountant. There's basically creating the team, the circle of support around the client to a safeguarding, creating protections to move everything forward in a way that makes sense and is logical and organized and not the overwhelming, amount of information and things to do. The client isn't at that alone. I'm
You
helping
know,
basically.
we live in a world right now where the subject of teams is very relevant. Whether you're building an NBA franchise or you're building a new band, a K-pop band or whatnot, nobody talks about teams when it comes to their divorce. They think, I'm going through divorce, I need a blank, whatever the blank is,
Lawyer.
or mediator.
Yeah.
Um, and then, of course, there's about 65% of society in Australia, UK, England, and Canada, United States, where they say, I don't want anybody on my team. In fact, I'm doing it all on my own. And we've got an epidemic right now of the vast majority of people that are going through separation and divorce do not have anybody on their team. It's them on their own, and they're called self-reps or unreps. So when we talk about your answer to the question, the initial stages of separation and creating the team, um, I have seen way too many times people hiring me or some of my colleagues, and they have no idea what the budget is. And whatever budget it is, whatever money they have or have access to or they're going to borrow, they haven't actually planned how to pace the use of that limited budget from beginning to end. And in some cases, they blow their wad in the first 2, 3, or 4 months. And I can tell you in the last 30 years how many times I've received a call from a client who wants to change lawyers, and they said, I split up 3 months ago and I've already spent $10,000 and I can't keep doing that with lawyer A and I'm looking to move. And the idea somehow is that, well, if they move and they keep moving, somehow the cost will go down, which sadly it does not, because then lawyer number two has to learn whatever lawyer number one already knew, possibly correct some of their mistakes and so forth. So when you talk about those early stages and speaking to the client, um, give me a little bit more data on the discussion about A, the team, and B, the budget for the team.
So sometimes we definitely go through this, and have so many clients that do exactly what you said. They spend 20, 30, 40,000, usually on credit cards. Sometimes parents are funding this. And, there's discussions to be had about legal aid, about self-rep, maybe a limited scope retainer type of thing. There's definitely discussions to be had about that. And also, spending what are you willing to give up that's not worth fighting for? Is it going to cost you more to fight for it than it's actually worth at the end? Is a discussion that we often have also. And also peace, inner peace, peace of mind. How far are you willing to take this? because that's emotional. And that's what we're working on as coaches. We're helping, with the emotional side of this. So I have clients that are like, I don't care. I'll come out penniless. I just want him ruined. Or, like that type of attitude is what we kind of try and calm down in the beginning stages and really get a bigger picture of after this is over and you're on the other side of this, what do you want it to look like? And how many years and dollars are we spending on this?
Right. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of people don't know this, but when they hire a lawyer, they're oftentimes also hiring the law clerk, sometimes a junior, depending on the firm. And the hourly rate that they are being quoted is not one person. It's actually sometimes a few people. And so, for example, if I go to court and I bring with me a junior or a law clerk, it's not just my hourly rate, it's my hourly rate plus another person's hourly rate for whatever the time is. And in some cases, it's not me. In other words, the law clerk is dealing with the client to prepare their financial statement. But oftentimes, clients who hire a lawyer are completely clueless about all of that. And if it wasn't for a divorce coach, how do they learn that information other than suffering from the bill at the other end?
I don't know. That's a good question. That's why people look at us as an additional expense, but we're saving you more than you're spending on us. 100%.
Sometimes when people ask me why, as a lawyer, I refer people to a divorce coach, I ask them rhetorically if they ever got married. And oftentimes they say yes. And I say, well, when you got married, did you use a wedding planner? And they said, of course. I said, why'd you use a wedding planner? They said, well, how do I know which hall to use and what food to order and where to get flowers from and whether I'm being hosed on the photographer and the videographer and the limousine? I said, are you still asking me why I refer people to a divorce coach? Because the same person that got married 15 or 20 years ago, they didn't know enough about how to figure out how to spend their limited budget on putting together an event called a wedding. Well, how is that any different on the exit sign where they have to now spend some money to get out of that very marriage that they used a planner to help them create? Wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
you need a planner to help them exit the same way? And that's precisely what I do. And I'll tell you, in my line of work, I have experienced tremendous success working with divorce coaches who have already had these conversations with clients so that when it comes time for them to pay me to do something, they're not questioning my bill, they're not questioning my time. They know exactly what needs to be done because they chose not to ask me to do the things that they do not need me to do. And that's been a real plus in terms of the triangulation of working with a client and a divorce coach. Some calls involve the three of us. Some calls involve just me and the divorce coach, where I speak industrial language to the divorce coach and I say, then please now have a conversation with a client. So I can speak to a divorce coach in 10 minutes in what it would take me an hour to say to a client. And a client only pays me for the 10-minute phone call to the divorce coach and the divorce coach's time than for me to spend at my hourly rate an hour with the client. And so the role of the divorce coach could not be more um, apropos when it comes to dealing with the very things that neither the lawyer nor the client have expertise in.
Yeah, 100%. As a paralegal, I often tell my clients, I don't come to me with those questions. I'm not a therapist. I'm here for your legal matter. So, but as a coach, that kind of reverses. When I do divorce coaching, that's exactly what I'm there for.
I want to thank Mafalda for her question. And she asks the question, did you say that the divorce could cost or often costs $20,000? I'm going to let you answer that question in a second, Batsheva, but I wanted to tell you, a couple of years ago, I had a case, a big case. It was a 2-week trial, and then we were successful at trial, and then the other side appealed it to the Court of Appeal, and we were successful at the Court of Appeal. And at the end of all of this, and I was like the fourth or the fifth lawyer in the circuit of lawyers that this client of mine had. At the end of all of this, the client spent, wait for it, Mafalda, $1 million, actually $1,050,000. And the judgment for costs was for $1 million. So the judge granted my client a full order for costs in the sum of $1 million to reimburse her for what she spent on her 6-year ordeal. And it was it was newsworthy. So it made it into the news and it made it into the Globe and Mail. And I was quoted. And I had people that I hadn't spoken to in many, many years say they saw my ad, they saw the article, and I got emails and calls to congratulate me about the $1 million costs recovery. And I said to them, I said, that's not congratulatory news. That's terrible news. Because the woman that hired me and all these other lawyers and experts, she had to spend $1 million to get justice. And I don't think it's justice that a judge ordered her ex-husband to reimburse her for the $1 million. She didn't make any money on it. And what she spent, even though she got it back, she is never going to get the money, get back the mental health, the psychological health, and the time of her life that she spent on this litigation. And so, Mafalda asks you, Batsheva, did you say a divorce cost $20,000? What do you say to Mafalda?
I say have that for your retainer in the beginning if you're willing to fight this all the way through. $20,000 is a drop in the bucket for most divorce proceedings.
And if you think about it, what does somebody spend on a wedding? You know, if it's a 20-person wedding, maybe it's, $2,000 to $5,000. If it's a 100-person wedding, maybe they might spend $50,000 to $100,000. If it's, some people and they're depending on the ethnicity, they might have a 300-person wedding and that might cost 100, 150,000. And it's not one check, right? There's all these different service providers to put together a wedding. And that's not even talking about the honeymoon. Well, when people talk about the cost of a divorce, there's not one service provider, but there is one service provider who is the divorce coach who assists them in choosing the service provider, ascertaining what the budget is. And if someone says to do such and such will cost such and such, the client doesn't know whether that's realistic or unrealistic, but the divorce coach does. And the divorce coach could say, you don't have to spend $800 an hour on a divorce lawyer. I can introduce you to a few others because for your type of case, you don't need that. You'd be just as good with this person. And that's the space and the value of the divorce coach, whereby they help the client deploy their limited resources smartly.
Yes, and I think also as coaches, we have good working relationships with, a nice group of lawyers. I've sent you clients that I knew would be good fits or could benefit from your expertise, and I've sent clients to many different lawyers that I have good relationships with also, which also helps the client, move things forward in a nice way. So I think the working relationship of like the wedding planner with all the vendors, we're kind of the same thing.
It's funny when people refer me work, whether it's a chartered accountant or a family doctor, or I've even had referrals from judges. Um, when I know that this new client was referred to me by so and so who I hold in high regard, I'm automatically treating them with silk gloves because I cherish my relationship with the referral source. And and most people who are going through separation and divorce don't have a best friend who's a divorce lawyer. And that's where the divorce coach comes in.
Mm-hmm.
We've got another question here. Well, it's not really a question, but it's Taya comments on the subject of non-court options. And what is the role of the divorce coach in steering people into a non-court avenue? Can you speak to that, Batsheva?
So I think you can, you can see from the beginning if this is something that can be mediated or if this is something that needs legal, based on the break, the marriage, the relationship, that people involved, the breakdown. I see situations where 100% you need a strong court order, whether it's protection order for abuse or for child protection issues. So I think you could see which direction we're going to go. But mediation is definitely something that I do often, and we always try. In certain cases, I always try mediation first. I do it within the community. We have, within the Jewish community, we have a mediation center, which focuses more, just because the aspects of Jewish life may be a little bit foreign to, just with any culture. It could be foreign to a mediator that isn't intimately involved in the community. So I attend those mediations, which would lead then to the baked in to the get. And then we also have to do the civil procedure. But definitely, I help women and men through mediation as well, and
And for
arbitration.
those and for those out in other faiths, I can tell you the Muslim faith, in the Christian churches, there are many services available within the religious circles to assist in the process of settlement of a divorce, oftentimes in a much more amicable, low conflict scenario. And litigation really is a last resort. And oftentimes it's not only the most expensive, but it's also the longest and the most stressful. And I've said this to people before, lawyers are very comfortable in court. And if you were to think about it from a tools-based approach, when you hire a lawyer, it's like a lawyer thinks, well, the tool generally is court. And so when you give a man a hammer, all they see is a nail. And so similarly, when people rush off to court or they hire lawyers who are adept and comfortable and their main tool is the courtroom, then before you know it, that client is now knee deep in litigation. And for those that don't know, to be able to even get into court, you have to fill out a form called an application, where it's a very quick, slippery slope, where what the spouse puts into the application is filled with allegations of misconduct against their ex. Well, how is that going to prompt an amicable divorce if the very first thing that you do to get in front of a judge is make horrible allegations about your ex? By the way, they could be completely true, but once you make it a public statement in a court document, the reaction generally is counter allegations and then months and years in litigation.
So that's one of the hardest things I find for my clients in the beginning is reading the materials. Reading the opposing party's materials alone is horrific for anybody because of what you just said, the allegations.
We have a question from Adrena, and it says, if a woman's been a stay-at-home mom and did not have access to money during the marriage except credit cards, is there a way she could be able to access money during the proceedings? She still has the credit card access, but everything she buys is being tracked, of course. And I'm just wondering if it's realistic that she gets interim support or something. Very good question. Under the family law rules, there is a provision that allows someone to get an advance, either an advance on what they are going to be entitled to, or a advance without it being characterized, or support. Now, what you just heard requires a court case, which is not exactly the first step that people should consider. But I can tell you this, in a situation where the very first step is an invitation to the ex to either choose court or a non-court approach, And if the invitation is from someone in a position of authority like me, where I could explain to them, if you advance my client some monies to be able to manage this process, then we will be able to use those monies to reduce the speed, the stress, and the cost by attending a mediator or a mediator arbitrator to resolve it. But if we don't get your cooperation, then we will have no choice other than to go to court and seek those advances that I've just described. Did you want to add to that, Batsheva?
No, I think this is more your department.
By the way, I really want to commend the participants who are sharing with us their questions. But can I go one step further with the participants? Some of you did not register through the portal, and so therefore we are not going to be able to send you any of our materials that we might refer to today. So if you feel comfortable, can you please put your email in the message box for our administrators to collect your email and be able to communicate with you after the event. I have another message here from Adrena. Hi, all. I'm here as I hope to get involved in divorce coaching. At this time, I'm a mortgage broker who supports and educates women in separations qualify for their own mortgage after separation. I'm with them sometimes even before they get to a lawyer and all the way to closing. I think that's great information, Adrena. And, there are many entry points. And I'll tell you, I think the women or men who reach out to you and talk about the possibility of them exiting a relationship, by virtue of the fact they're speaking to a mortgage broker, says to me that they've already identified the possibility of sunshine on the other end of this journey. And they are thinking about buying a house or a condo, and they are thinking about the possibility of maybe getting a mortgage so that they could actually get into that new home or condo. And they're thinking about, well, to get a mortgage, I'm going to need a separation agreement. And to get a separation agreement, I need to be separated. And to get separated, I need a divorce coach. And so it's a very interesting chain of causation that sometimes does not start with Batsheva. It starts with Adrena and leads to Batsheva, but sometimes it starts with Batsheva and leads to Adrena. It's not always a one direction street. Adrena, I see that you've got your hand up. Did you want to add anything? No? Okay. We're going to move on to the next stage. So the initial separation has now occurred. You've discussed with the client the plans, the process, the team, and what to expect going forward. Now you are into the legal, financial, negotiation, mediation, arbitration, or possible assessment, parenting assessment stage. What is the role of the divorce coach in this, what I would call the real meat and potatoes of their divorce settlement work?
So I'm going to talk about a client that has a lawyer in this case. We're working closely along with the lawyer. Like you mentioned already, sometimes the coach and the lawyer are having their own conversations, which will in turn help the coach navigate the situation with the client. Um, Self rep is more complicated in the sense that we're doing a lot of different consultations, a lot of different resources and things like that. But I want to ask you, as a lawyer, what do you expect from a coach during this time?
Um, like I said earlier, I triangulate. So no different than in athletic coaching. An Olympic swimmer might have one coach who works on speed, and then another coach that works on flexibility, and another coach that works on their brain. And so similarly, in my line of work, I like working with a coach and determining at different junctures, what are our roles? Like, what am I doing? What's the coach doing? And by the way, what's the client doing? Because the more the client does, the less the lawyer and the coach do. And the more the client does, we get two benefits out of that. One, the client saves money.
Mhm.
Two, the client is starting to own their life. They are empowered in this journey. They're not just delegating this to everybody else and saying, let me know once I'm divorced. They are part of this process of exiting a union and entering a new chapter of their life, and they must own that. And if they delegate it, they're missing that opportunity. And so the role of the various check-in moments, me, the coach, and the client, is to determine where are we at now? And what's the client going to do? What's the coach going to do? What am I going to do? And then we come back sometimes a couple days later, sometimes a couple months later, and we check in again. And we measure what we did do, we measure what we're going to do, and we measure who's doing what. And the role of the divorce coach is outside of those triangulated meetings, is to actually speak to the client and check in on the client and say, how are you doing on your homework? And what can I do to support you? And what's holding you back? And why haven't you gotten to it? And life happens. And the lawyer's job is not to get in the way of life that happens. After that meeting, the client might have gotten a call that their father is in the hospital because he just had a heart attack. Well, the client's not going to call me and say, oh, by the way, I can't get all that financial disclosure because I've been in the hospital visiting my father, who just had a heart attack. But the divorce coach does. And the client and the divorce coach will work on things maybe in tandem. And the divorce coach might shoot me an email that says, just so that you know, the client's preoccupied, or mom or dad are in the hospital. Can you please buy more time? And this is the essence of the teamwork that occurs with respect to the role of the divorce coach. Now, in some cases, there's more people on the team. I hate to say this, but some cases do require, for example, a forensic accountant or a parenting assessor. In those moments, again, I have historically been paid to coach the client on assessments or children's lawyer or the role of the forensic accountant. But most of the coaches that I work with are extremely adept at what needs to be done. And it's a lot faster and cheaper for the client to get that sort of support from the divorce coach. Sometimes the divorce coach literally goes with the client to the bank or to the real estate lawyer's office and helps them either sign documents, get information. And that's not a service lawyers do. So there's that. We actually, just pardon me, Batsheva, before I answer your question, Andrea asked the question, what is the family law rule that deals with the subject of advances on separation, should that be needed? And the answer is it's under Rule 24 sub 25, where it says the court may make an order that a party, husband, wife, pay an amount of money to another party to cover part or all of the expenses of carrying on the case, including legal fees. By the way, that's just the rule, and there is a whole body of law. And if you go to canlii.org, CANLII, and type in the rule, you will see the cases where the judges have ruled on why a judge would grant somebody money at the beginning of the case, that generally speaking, it serves as a credit to the person that's paying it. But in some cases, it's a line of credit or a mortgage on the home or a HELOC. Uh, we seem to have another question from Wendy Rovers. What signs, Batsheva, do you see in clients that indicate it would be the right time for their lawyer to suggest working with a divorce coach?
Um, so I think the divorce coach comes before the lawyer specifically. But if they don't have a divorce coach and they've gone to a lawyer first, um, so I think it would be incredible if lawyers, all lawyers, viewed us as an asset. And I think that we have to work on that first, because I don't know a lot of lawyers that refer, aside from Steve, I don't know a lot of lawyers that really send clients to a divorce coach. But I think it's right away, it's the overwhelm, it's the emotional aspect, it's everything we've discussed. It should happen right away. It should be a natural, like you have a nurse and a doctor, like there's always, it's not just one person navigating this entire situation.
You're correct. Jedediah asks the question, do divorce coaches assist legal aid family law clients? Are the fees for a coach fixed or based on income? I'll answer the first one, and Batsheva will answer the second one. Uh, Legal Aid is a provincial-run organization funded with government funds. It's a very large organization. It's about $200 million a year of their budget. I myself did legal aid for about 15, 20 years. And legal aid is a certificate program. It actually also has duty counsel and other services. But legal aid is a certificate program for those people that qualify. And by the way, the qualifications are very, very strict. I think the income level has to be, for one person under 20,000 and for a family under 35,000. So the income levels must be very, very low. And if a person qualifies financially, they will get a legal aid certificate. And if they get a legal aid certificate, they can use the legal aid certificate on a lawyer that accepts legal aid. We don't accept legal aid anymore, but I used to in my earlier years. And a lot of lawyers who do accept legal aid, generally speaking, are younger lawyers, like I was once. And legal aid does not cover divorce coaching. But for some clients that are able to access legal aid, therefore, whatever additional money they may have, because they're now not paying a lawyer, the smart thing is that they could use that limited available money to now work with a divorce coach. And the reason it's even smarter for legal aid clients, and I can tell you this from firsthand experience, when I took legal aid would say, you can help this client up to 25 hours. At 25 hours, I'm done. So a divorce coach who helps a legal aid client is able to ensure that the client doesn't burn through those hours and is using the divorce coach to do a lot of the legwork and to avoid burning through the credit limit that legal aid grants. So actually, I think that the relationship between a legally aided client and divorce coaching is, if not more important, equally important than with people that are not on legal aid. But to the question about the fee structure for divorce coaches, can you answer that, Batsheva?
So I think everyone has a different fee structure. I think it's based on experience and credentials, education, it's not set.
Yeah, so the answer in my experience, Jedediah, is that all divorce coaches, like all lawyers, like all accountants, they charge by the hour. And some people have subscriptions where you pay an amount for the month and you have a certain amount of hours, like they sell bundles. And some people will just charge by the hour. So it depends. Divorce coaching, like lawyers, is a private sector service. And so everybody has their own fee structure and their arrangements. Some require retainers, some don't. Some charge on credit cards by, pre-authorized. Some do invoicing. It depends. We have another question from Andrea. When divorce rates are so high, in the next 10 to 20 years, marriages become less common. How do divorce coaches pivot to stay relevant? So we use the word marriages very loosely. There's a lot of different forms of spousal unions. There are people that are married with a marriage license. There are people that come here from other countries who have been married there. We have people that are living in relationships that are common law. And the question becomes, what's a common law relationship if they've lived together for an hour or a week or a month or a year? And so that would require legal advice and a legal determination. But in most cases where two people are romantic partners and they're living together, whether they have children or don't, whether they have property together or don't, they are spouses. And as a result of that, when that relationship ends, it's not uncommon for them to need the support of a divorce coach. And so, Andrea, you ask a correct question because the word divorce presupposes the word marriage, but divorce coaches work equally with people that are married and people that are common law or just cohabiting spouses as well. But Trevor, I'm going to move us along. So let's talk about now the co-parenting. In the co-parenting role of spouses who have children, of course, what does the divorce coach do as a support mechanism for a co-parent going through separation and divorce?
So this is really a brand new relationship that these two people need to create together. It's not something that we're severing, it's something that we're creating, which is different because a lot of divorce is severing. But we need to create a working relationship. Obviously, we know just because two people don't get along, it doesn't mean they still can't be two great parents to the children. And a lot of the times we need to focus, well, all the time, we need to focus on the best interests of the children and really bringing our clients to a place in their hearts and in their minds where they realize that their children's needs, emotions are going to come before theirs right now. And this is what I really work towards with my clients and helping them see the bigger picture, for themselves, for their children. And you know what, single parenting isn't easy. And a lot of women, in the beginning, when I'm working with them and they're like, they want all this time alone with the child and the father shouldn't have any time. And I'm like, okay, let's work that out in your mind. This is what it looks like. And you're doing this on your own. Like it's not always the best situation for burnout, for financially, emotionally, for the child or the parent. So really looking at the bigger picture and taking the emotion, not the emotion of the child, but the emotion of the spouses out of it and looking at the child. I can go on about this for a while, but I also work together with child protection, with Jewish Family Child Services. I have a good working relationship with them. Often in these situations, if there is abuse or violence, we're always involved. Also, the police. So it's the co-parenting is a very big piece.
I sometimes, when I'm in trial and I am hearing a mom often say that historically the children have always been in her care. And this is the beginning of the explanation as to why the mother in the case is asking for what used to be called custody, which is now called primary care of the children, or to put it in simple language, why the kids should always be with mom and should be with dad either less or little or in some sort of uneven way. And sometimes when I represent the man who is trying to get more time, I will, in cross-examination, ask the mother about her relationship with her father. And I will ask her what she liked about her father and what she didn't like about her father. And how much time did she spend with her father when she was a child? And if she can go back to childhood, would she reduce the amount of time she spent with her dad? Or would she increase that amount of time? And oftentimes in that cross-examination exchange, it's almost like an aha moment. The very thing that this woman is declaring to be her goal is the very thing that she herself would have wanted differently when she herself was a child. Because um, too often, children of divorce end up losing out, losing out on the love, the affection, the attention. And the children, Judge Brownstone wrote a book called The Tug of War. And the essence of the book is that the handkerchief in the middle of the rope is the child, and both sides are pulling. And this child, which is like the handkerchief, is literally right above the quicksand. And at the end of this tug of war, everybody's losing. That doesn't mean that the children should always be with each parent equally. But, one of the rules of the divorce coach is to know when to pull the rope
Mm-hmm.
and when not to pull the rope. And sadly, too many people by default think that, oh, now that we're splitting up, I must pull this rope as hard as I can because everything depends on pulling that rope closer to me. And it ends up sometimes, I've seen people who don't pull the rope very hard and the other side lets go because they just didn't pull the rope that hard.
I
And
use that a lot
again,
with my clients, the pulling the rope. I like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move on. We've got just a few minutes left. Before we close up, I want you to just tell me a little bit about what is your role just as your client is inching towards a divorce settlement. They're literally just there. The house is just about to close. They're just about to get their money. They're just about to move into their new condo, and you're there, and you've done all of that excellent work, but there's a little bit more to go. What's your life like there?
So it's the rebuild and the renew, and seeing that there are so many possibilities and the world is open. Before, we were closing things up, we were dividing, we were finalizing, and now we're opening, and there's just like so many possibilities. And that's one thing that I love so much is that nobody's holding you back. You can do whatever you want now, and the world is just open. And this is one of, I think, the best parts of the process. And like, I think I've told you before, I've been to clients' second weddings and seen them start their lives fresh and blend families. And I work with them throughout that process also, blending families. And it's just the best part. And it really brings satisfaction that we've done something to make a difference in someone's life and their children's lives.
What I would add to that, and I've seen this with many divorce coaches, is it's one thing to go through this whole journey. It's a completely different thing to go through this whole journey and for it to change you in a positive way. And I've seen too many cases where the divorce coaches have um, really done a really great job of sending the person into the next chapter of their life, smarter, stronger, more independent, more in control of their finances, more of a capable parent. And this is the kicker, and a better future partner in another relationship. It's I hate it when I have clients hiring me twice or three times because it says to me they have never learned their lesson.
Mm-hmm.
They're making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And the role of the divorce coach is partly also to help this person rebuild their life. And part of rebuilding means learning from what works and learning from what didn't work. And it's a real pleasure to see people having um, having a really, really hard time saying goodbye. I mean, they don't have such a hard time saying goodbye to me, but saying goodbye to you because you played such an important role in literally, it's like Alice in Wonderland. You're walking them through the door, you're opening up the door, and you're showing them the sunlight, the sunshine, the possibilities, the moniker, life after divorce
We're going
is,
through the seasons.
that's right.
Yeah.
I have to say to those that have joined us in the chat room, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing with us your questions. For those of you that haven't yet shared with us your email, please do. I want to say thank you to Batsheva Sack. She really is a tremendous person, a tremendous mother, a role model for so many people. And then on top of all of that, she has converted not only her life experience and her education, her university education and her post university education, into helping so many people, primarily in her faith-based community. But um, I have seen equals to what Batsheva is doing. Somebody's asked this question in a chat in the other communities, in the Muslim community, in the Baha'i community, in the Muslim community. Listen, there's no shortage of multiculturalism in Ontario, and there's people that service other communities, Portuguese, Greeks, Italians, Chinese, and so forth. So I say thank you, Batsheva, for the role that you play in our community and also in the DCAO, the Divorce Coaching Association of Ontario. I also want to say to those that have been here today that we just had a board meeting yesterday. Batsheva mentioned that. And we are establishing committees, and we've got space on some of our committees for volunteers. So if you are at all interested in becoming part of the Divorce Coaches Association of Ontario and to serve on one of our committees, all you got to do is send me or Batsheva or any one of our board members. They're all on the website, dcao.ca, an email, and we've got events coming up. If you go to the DCAO Divorce Coaches Association of Ontario website, you'll click the button called events, and we've got lots of events. And for those of you that are not at all in divorce coaching, but you're in the same space, you're going to benefit tremendously from the courses that we are offering, the workshops we're offering. And lastly, I am super excited, or for those that got tickets, you'll join in my excitement, to tell you that on April 22, we are having this most fabulous film night at the Manulife Center at Cineplex, where we are screening a tremendous film on divorce called The Squid and the Whale. And before that, we are going to have a cocktail. And even if you couldn't get a ticket to go to the actual film, you might want to come for 6 o'clock to the cocktail party from 6 to 7 and meet with a whole bunch of divorce professionals, lawyers, accountants, people that work in our space, and of course, the board of directors of DCAO. And then, of course, the movie starts at 7, and then we're going to have a post-film discussion, myself and another senior divorce coach by the name of Stacy Mendelson. So with that said, I want to say thank you, Batsheva. Thank you, DCAO, and we will catch you all at our next event. Be well.
Thank you.